This episode of Trudge Report is brought to you by Accent Garage Doors. Operating in Palm Beach County, the Treasure Coast, and Brevard County, Florida, Accent Garage Doors is your most trusted and reliable source for all things garage doors. Successfully in business now for almost 20 years, Accent Garage Doors gives you the best quality materials and appliances, along with reliability, dedication, and professionalism at the best possible price. Plus, the owner is handsome and has the best Irish accent of anyone in all the land. Members of Trudge Report have personally used his services and give Accent Garage Doors 2 thumbs up and a 5-star review. We wouldn't go anywhere else for our garage door needs, and neither should you. Accent Garage Doors is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and will exceed all of your garage door needs. You can visit their website at www.accentgaragefl.com or call 772-337-7733 and ask for John. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening and welcome to another episode of Trudge Report. This is a recovery-based podcast, but don't worry. If you're not sober or not ready to be sober, we talk about plenty of other things, including sports, trending topics, and a good bit of nonsense. My name is Shawn, and I am your host. I'm joined by my good friends and fellow trudgers, Bill, Corey, and Greg. Please remember to listen on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our videos will still be posted each week, so you can watch episodes on YouTube and Facebook. But as always, please be sure to download on your listening platforms. Remember to like and subscribe on all social media outlets with the handle @TrudgeReportPod. We are brought to you by Stella Mix Podcast Management and our wonderful producer and editor, Miss Janine Stella. Gentlemen, I'm back. I was traveling last week. It's good to be here with everybody. How's everybody doing? Let's start with Corey. How are you tonight, Corey?
I'm good. I switched gyms. That's what's good with me. I switched gyms.
Way to bring the energy.
Whatever. Sean was.
Corey's preparing for a hurricane.
Yeah, we're getting drilled by a hurricane this week, and nobody cares. So
when?
I don't know. Wednesday.
Oh, all right.
Whatever.
Okay.
I'm done.
That's it. Okay. All right, Bill. Good evening.
How you doing? Yeah, I'm having a good week, I guess. We're all keeping an eye on the storm, but what are you going to do? Life isn't so much about avoiding the storm as much as it is about learning to dance in the rain, Corey.
I'm getting off.
Tap dance in that rain.
Hanging up.
I've never heard that.
That's
before.
a Bill D special, guys. We're going to put that on a T-shirt and give it to Corey.
Janine,
that's a lyric.
Janine, where's the leave meeting button? I don't see it.
That's the lyric to one of his rap videos.
Yeah, those are my 97 lyrics right there, buddy.
His hip hop video.
Yep.
Sick.
So all is well here.
Good stuff, Bill. Mr. Greg, sorry about your Guardians tonight, but it's only tonight.
Yeah. Things are still good here, man. We're having unlike you guys, I'm praying for you and really everybody in Florida, but I love this time of year up here, man. It's cold in the mornings, warm in the afternoons. It's absolutely beautiful out. Gonna start decorating for Halloween on the outside of the house. This week. So yeah, psyched, man. Getting pumped for it. Guardians did have a tough loss today, but it was a very good ball game. Tight ball game and a fun one to watch. Playoff baseball is here, and it's really the only sports things that we have here in Cleveland to look forward to at the moment.
Greg, go ahead. Hey, Greg, that's awesome. Enjoy your 6 days of good weather in Cleveland. I do think you have a mea culpa for the people. Your mea culpa should be, Greg apparently made a side comment last week that he lived in a haunted house for 2 years. So we're going to need the full story next week, Greg, here on the Trudge Report. We're going to need to hear all the spooky stories.
We can dish it out, yeah.
He buried the lead.
He buried that puppy. I mean, he did a fantastic job.
We ran out of time. We ran out of time, and I did not want to try and steal the spotlight from the great Ed and Lorraine Warren. So,
Our imposters, Greg. We want the real story.
We will. You'll get it. You'll be waiting with anticipated breath for it.
I love it. I'm actually going to give you part of my segment next week just to hear this.
Okay. Very good. Yeah, hats off to your Commanders, Shawn. They look like a really good football team. Jaden Daniels is going to be rookie.
He scrambled the hell out of it yesterday,
and and he might be up there if he keeps playing the way he's playing. He could be in the league or running for the MVP. I think that's a little much.
I appreciate that. Yeah, but I don't want to get too excited.
I mean, he had his worst game of the season yesterday, and you guys still killed it. So,
Hey, Greg, whose fantasy football team is he on? Just so I forget.
I don't know who has him. Do you?
I don't know. Yeah.
Do you?
Check, please.
Michael Montmarquet. No,
you sat Kirk O'Chains on your bench, though, dude. Come on,
you got to when you got Jaden.
Hey, they played fantastic. I for the first time in a long time cut that game off in the middle of the third quarter, maybe whenever the little stint was where our $230 million man walked off the field.
What are we doing? Have we rock bottom?
They're so lifeless.
We have the city of Cleveland right now. Well, here's the deal, and I don't want to take up too much time with this segment. It is blatantly obvious that not only does the city of Cleveland not believe in Deshaun Watson, the team doesn't. The receivers don't want to play with the guy. You can see it. If you know football, you can look at that body language and see everybody has given up on this guy. Yeah. And I think Stefanski, and I like Stefanski. A lot of people around here don't. I do. But the guy looks like a clown getting up there after the post game and saying, yep, he's our guy. And we're just going to. No, dude, he's not the guy. He's not the guy. He's not even close to the guy he was in Houston.
Isn't that so crazy how that happens, though? Like, he was so highly touted in Houston. I know all the allegation stuff, but it's just crazy where we're at with that now.
Yeah,
I mean, love it. It's a true Pittsburgh love story.
Oh, of course you guys do. And hey, I don't blame you, because if the shoe was on the other foot, man, I'd be the same way. So, but yeah,
I might buy his jersey. I might buy his jersey.
After June 1st, if we cut him, we only incur an $84 million cap hit as opposed to what we could. I say you cut him after June 1st and you just start over, man, because it.
Can you bench him, or does he have to play?
No, he doesn't have to play. But the problem is that you have an ownership that's entirely too stubborn.
Yeah,
they're like, oh well, this is our guy. We're not ready to all this money. Yeah. They're not ready to. It's like that guy who's just holding on. You know what I'm saying? It's crazy. Like it was a huge swing, an even bigger miss, and it's time to just bench his ass. So that's what I got.
Yeah. Yep. Good. Sucks. It was a wild couple, a few games, good games yesterday, to be honest with you. Some good ones. Not that one, though, unfortunately.
Your Ravens pulled it off, Shawn.
My second favorite team did pull it off. Thank you, Bill.
Whatever.
That was how he says second now every time
second.
he talks
I
about
always have
Washington's
listen, roll the tape. Roll the tape. It's what do you call it? Set in stone. In a previous podcast, how I very clearly said that I'm always going to be a Washington Commander fan at heart. Always my first choice.
We
sucked for so long. That's fine. Set it up. Set it up.
I don't know how.
What are we doing tonight? Let's get into the topic. What are we doing? Change subjects. No.
It's spooky season.
Right. It is spooky season. Greg, first off, thank you again for running the show last week. I was traveling for work. I listened back to the pod and like my calling. It was good stuff. Anytime that any of us miss an episode, we got to call in. I just think it adds like an element of humor to it. But Greg, great job running the show. Really and truly, thank you. And it's good to be back this week. It is spooky season. And so it is my week to go for spooky season. So I have chosen the Black Dahlia murder. Okay. Has anybody, I know Greg probably has. I think, Corey, you said you hadn't even ever heard of it until I brought it up.
No, but Gabby knew all about it.
Okay, cool.
I saw the movie.
Oh God, the one that Greg said not to mention.
It wasn't good. Yeah,
no,
it was
horrible.
No, but I got a few other notes here. There are some really good books that were written about it and stuff like that. And there's a really good TV show called "I Am the Night," 2019 TNT Pictures. It was like maybe 8 episodes. Chris Pine is one of the main actors in it. Phenomenal show. And it's about the Black Dahlia murder, but it actually kind of more so talks about his granddaughter that I'll get into here, Tamar Hodel. and kind of her story, and then it goes into the Black Dahlia. Very, very, very good show. So, all right, Black Dahlia murder. I have some key points, and then I have like some more descriptions on some of the more like stories within the stories that were really good. So, the victim, her name was Elizabeth Short. She was born in July 29th, my birthday, 1924. She was murdered on January 15th, 1947 in a vacant lot in Los Angeles. Her body was found mutilated with evidence of torture and mutilation. So I'm going to get back into that just a little bit, but a couple other key points. It was an LAPD investigation. Eventually they brought the FBI in, one of the largest and most extensive in LA history at the time. There was over 150 suspects. Many were questioned, but no one was ever formally charged. It's still an unsolved murder today. It provided a media frenzy, sensationalized the coverage, earned the case the nickname the Black Dahlia. I'll get more into that. That doesn't really make a lot of sense of why they called it that, but there is an explanation. And then
was she cut in half?
Yeah, I'll get it. I have a little blurb on that. Yeah.
My
but
bad.
she was.
You
No, you're fine.
The mutilation thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to get out of it.
No, you're good.
Okay.
There was a lot of public outcry that led to increased pressure on law enforcement. The main theories and suspects were Dr. George Hodel, and I'll get into him more. He's like the main suspect in that show, I Am the Night. Kind of revolves around him a lot. A guy named Arnold Smith, which actually wasn't even his real name. He was a former boyfriend of Elizabeth Short. A guy that was in the like Hollywood scene as well. Robert Red Manley, the last person to see him alive. There was a bunch of serial killer theories, and then there was also like some celebrity suspect theories, like Bugsy Siegel killed her, Orson Welles, and stuff like that. None of those really have any credence, but they're there. The legacy and the cultural impact of this really is one of the mainsprings that sparked the entire true crime fascination. Like this case helped popularize the genre of true crime, possibly more than anything else did, because at the time it wasn't really around yet. Film and literature, there's numerous books and adaptations and movies, and as I mentioned, the aforementioned TV show. And then Elizabeth Short's tragic story became kind of like a symbol of like Hollywood's dark side. You know, there's all that stuff around the dark side. Like I said, it was an unresolved case, and it still remains unsolved.
This is before they were all pedophiles, right?
Correct. Yes. Maybe right. Well, actually,
at least
because
is pedophile.
Yeah, because some of this is all right. So, 1947 murder of Elizabeth Short. She was 22 years old, a Hollywood hopeful, like an up and coming actress in Los Angeles. On the morning of January 15th, 1947, a random mother taking her child for a walk in a Los Angeles neighborhood stumbled upon a gruesome sight. It was the body of a young woman sliced clean in half at her waist, and her mouth had been cut up to her ear. And there was some other mutilation on it, but basically she was literally cut in half. The body was just a few feet from the sidewalk, and it was posed in such a way that this mother thought it was a mannequin at first glance. Despite the extensive mutilation and cuts on the body, there wasn't a drop of blood at the scene, indicating that she had most likely been murdered elsewhere. The ensuing investigation was at first led by the LA Police Department. The FBI came in a little bit later and helped, and within this is in 1947, within less than an hour, they identified the body. They had her fingerprints, Elizabeth Short's fingerprints, on file. Oddly enough, she had applied for a job with the commissary of the Army's camp back in 1943, and then she was picked up for like underage drinking, like when she was also young and stuff, and her mugshot was on file and all that stuff as well. So she was dubbed the Black Dahlia, and this is what, I don't know if this makes any sense, and maybe somebody has more, but by the press for her rumored penchant for sheer black clothes and for the Blue Dahlia movie that was out at the time. I don't really know much about the Blue Dahlia movie, but it just sounds like the media got a hold of it, and you know, it does catch you. Black Dahlia murder, like it does kind of catch you, but it sounds like she just was a up and coming actress that wore a lot of black clothes, so nothing too special there. The FBI ran a bunch of record checks, and across the nation, they had suspicions that the murderer may have had skills in dissection because the body was so cleanly cut. So they checked out a bunch of students at the local university, at the University of Southern California, the medical school there. They had one break in the case. Oh, I lost my place. They had one break in the case. they found fingerprints on something, but it was attached on like an anonymous letter that may have been sent to the authorities by the killer, but the prints weren't in the files. So it's still a mystery. Okay, so let me stop real quick. Does anybody have any questions or clarification before I get into George Hodel and his...
Didn't they interview like 300 students from that medical?
They might have. I don't have the exact number, but I know they interviewed like 150 suspects originally. And then, I don't know if that number includes the students from the medical school and all that, but I'm sure they conducted, a number of those as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So the main suspect, and most people still believe that this guy was the murderer, a guy named Dr. George Hodel. He was an American physician and a suspect in the murder. He was never formally charged with the crime, but at the time, the police considered him as a viable suspect, and 2 of his children believed he was guilty. He was also accused of raping his daughter, Tamar Hodel, who was a biracial child. She was half black, half white.
He's guilty.
And so he was accused of raping his own daughter, but was acquitted of that crime. He lived overseas multiple times after the murder, primarily in the Philippines between the 1950s and the 1990s. He would kind of come back and forth. In 1949, his teenage daughter, Tamar, accused him of incestuous sexual abuse and impregnating her. So not only did he rape her, but he apparently got her pregnant. He was acquitted after a widely publicized trial. 2 witnesses to the alleged abuse testified at the trial, and the third recanted their earlier testimony and refused to come forward, with one theory being that Hodel had threatened to kill her or threatened her into silence. Tamar's testimony was perceived as contradictory and attention-seeking. She was young, 1947, little black girl, right? There was a lot of race stuff going on. Hodel came to police attention as a suspect in the Elizabeth Short murder after the sexual abuse trial. So the sexual abuse stuff happened first. He was known or suspected sex criminals in the area were being investigated for the Short case, and it had come out in the trial that Tamar had allegedly claimed her father was the Dahlia killer. So in Tamar's rape case against her father, Dr. Hodel, it came out somewhere, whether it was in the indictment or the deposition, whatever it was, the actual trial, that she felt that her dad had killed Elizabeth Short. Hodel's medical degree also aroused suspicion. He would have had the skills to dissect the body cleanly and all that stuff.
What was his position?
He was a physician and a surgeon, it just says. And actually, it goes on a little bit later about he did some psychiatry work and stuff, but he was definitely a general physician and a surgeon. He definitely had the knowledge. His medical degree... Hold on. Given the hypothesis that whoever bisected Short's body had some degree of surgical skill, at least 8 witnesses claimed firsthand knowledge of a 1946 relationship between Elizabeth Short and Hodel. So kind of everything was a lot of speculation up to this point, but then there's 8 people that said that he knew Elizabeth Short. Now, this doesn't really come into the research I did, but the show Into the Night, and I did a little more research on this. George Hodel and all his cronies, they were into some weird cult-like shit. In the basement, with the masks and ritual stuff around fires and all kinds of weird shit. The TV show is fantastic. You guys should watch it. But so the theory was that Hodel and his cronies would have all these kind of high-profile parties, and they'd invite all the rich and the famous around Los Angeles. And of course, a hot, pretty young, up-and-coming actress was definitely invited to that, as were many other women. So that's kind of where the theory that they knew each other. And then, of course, there's these 8 witnesses that said they had a relationship to some degree or the other. Back in Los Angeles from China, the full details of the investigation, and he was in the country at that time in Los Angeles. He was just back from China. The full details of the investigation came to light only in 2003, when a George Hodel Black Dahlia file was, in quotes, discovered in the archives of the Los Angeles City District Attorney's Office. The file revealed that in 1950, Hodel was a suspect of the Dahlia murder. His Hollywood residence was electronically bugged by an 18-man district attorney / LAPD task force between February 15th and March 27th, 1950. The DA tapes recorded George Hodel saying this. This is a quote. "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia, they can't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary anymore because she's dead." Side note, his secretary was dead during this time as well. "They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary." Hodel was also interviewed as a suspect in another murder in 1949 of a lady named Louise Springer. They dubbed it the Green Twig murder, though evidence to support this accusation was not publicly made available until like July 2018. That could have been like, hey, he was a subject in this murder, same town, Los Angeles. We're going to consider him a subject here, but who knows? In October 1949, Hodel's name was mentioned in a formal written report to the grand jury as one of 5 prime suspects in the Black Dahlia murder, but none of the named suspects were submitted to the grand jury for consideration for the indictment, as the investigation was still ongoing. Hodel obtained a degree in psychiatry and counseled prisoners in the territorial prison in Hawaii for 3 years, then moved to the Philippines where he started a new family and appears to have remained until 1990 when he died in 1999 in San Francisco without charges ever being filed. His son, Steve Hodel, written in many books and there's files that he believes Hodel re-entered the United States multiple times each year from 1958 through 1988, and then specifically in 1966 to 1969 to commit more murders and then return to the Philippines. So like this dude's family 100% believed he did it. All right. The Steve Hodel wrote books. He went on interviews. He had a bunch of info on why he did it. The son also wrote stuff on the Zodiac Killer and other cases as well. But I'll just read this real quick. On an 2006 episode of Cold Case Files hosted by Bill Curtis, illustrates the mixed reaction to Steve Hodel's hypothesis as outlined in his first book, Black Dahlia Avenger. At the time, District Attorney Stephen Kay described himself as highly impressed by Steve Hodel's research and conclusions and even went so far to declare the case had been solved. Less impressed was Detective Brian Carr of the LAPD, who was then in charge of the Black Dahlia case at that time, which was still officially open. Carr's opinion was that Hodel's theory was based on a few intriguing facts linked together by unsubstantial supposition. Short's relatives also disagreed that the photo in Hodel's album were of Short. There was rumors that George Hodel had a bunch of pictures of Elizabeth Short, but in 1947, pictures weren't super clear, so it was kind of hard to tell. Carr added that if he ever took a case as weak as Steve Hodel's to a prosecutor, he would be laughed out of the office. Carr admitted that he had not read all of Steve Hodel's materials, basically saying, I don't have time, I'm too busy working on open cases. But it sounds like Steve Hodel really kind of hit it real good. And I'll close with this because I think this is possibly the most fascinating part of all this. And this I had to dig for. So in July 2018, a lady named Sandy Nichols of Indianapolis, Indiana, while going through her recently deceased mother's personal effects, discovered a, in quotation, dying declaration letter written by her grandfather, W. Glenn Martin, dated October 26, 1949. The handwritten envelope read, "In case of Margaret Ellen or Glenna Jean's death," and was initialed WGM, which was the guy's name, W. Glenn Martin. The letter was written out of fear that one or both of his teenage daughters might be killed. The 3-page letter identified W. Glenn Martin as a paid LAPD police informant working for a Sergeant McCauley. Sergeant McCauley was LAPD Internal Affairs Division. He described his activities as working undercover for LAPD detectives to help them identify and arrest corrupt police officers. In his words, quote, "It was to try and see if other officers could be investigated." I don't even know that word. Inveigled into crime. I can't even pronounce that. Never even seen that word before. Close quotation. The Martin letter, reproduced in full in the chapter afterward in the Black Dahlia Avenger 3, went on to name G.H., George Hodel, just the initials, on 17 separate occasions, identifying him as a personal acquaintance of this guy Martin, as well as McCauley, the LAPD detective, and named him as killer of both Elizabeth Short, the Black Dahlia, and the Louise Springer, which was the Green Twig murder. Martin's letters claim that both he and G.H., George Hodel, personally knew Springer, and he believed that G.H. had also killed her. LAPD at the time was actively investigating the Springer and Black Dahlia murders and had publicly identified them as probably connected, in quotations. Springer was garroted on July 13th, 1949, just 2 blocks away from where Short's body was found in 1947. So dude was murdered, right? Like during the investigations and all that stuff. And this was like a dying letter. Included in the letter was the fact that LAPD, after being informed that GH knew the victim, Springer, brought GH in to be grilled about the Springer murder. The Martin letter made it clear that GH was known and protected by law enforcement. So George Hodel was a powerful dude, and he had law enforcement on his side, which in the show, there's law enforcement at his little cult-like rituals and stuff like that. And that they let him go, in quotations. Martin's instructions were that his letter was to be opened only in case of harm coming to either one of his daughters. No harm came to either of them, so the letter remained unreported and in his family's possessions for 70 years until discovered and read by Martin's granddaughter. The information in the Martin letter reestablishes the timeline and the fact that the LAPD undercover agent Martin named George Hodel to LAPD detectives in June or July of 1949. The letter establishes that LAPD suspected and brought Hodel in for questioning and grilled him on both the Louise Springer and the Elizabeth Short murders some 3 months prior to his incest arrest of his daughter in October of the same year. So that's it. That's all I got. I mean, I have other stuff on some other possible suspects, but none were even as intriguing as this. And there are a couple of other possible viable suspects, but just a wild time in the late 1940s in Los Angeles with all this stuff going on.
George did it.
I mean, either that or it was the perfect murder and somebody else did it. And that's, you know what I mean? The perfect murder.
I think if he would have done it, he would have got caught. I mean, because like this whole cutting her in half was like, from what I've read before, I believe it was like surgical, like almost like it was like a machine, like she was put on like through a machine or something like that.
Well, I don't
know. I mean, I'm pretty sure there might even be a picture of it, somewhere.
Oh yeah. You can see the crime scene photo.
And it's like crazy. Like the cut is like crazy.
Yeah.
I think that, like back then, they just like their evidentiary skills were just not what we have today. If it was in today's day and age, I think they would have found some kind of evidence, DNA of some sort. They just didn't have that technology back then, which I think could have helped him get away with it if he indeed did it. But
also, not just that, is like you're talking about J. Edgar Hoover's FBI at the time, which there was a lot of things they were really good at. There was a lot of things that they were growing pains that they were going through, and
right.
they were flawed. You also had historically, really up until the 80s and 90s, police departments not wanting to share information with one another, not really wanting to work with other, and that's rampant all over California, because they say that if it hadn't been for that, they would have caught the Zodiac killer, but police departments didn't want to share information. If it were for that, Richard Ramirez wouldn't have killed as many people as he did, because they would have worked together to solve it. So, a lot of bravado, I guess, if you will, but a
lot of ego.
One thing that I don't know if you uncovered in your research or not. I know about it because I've read. I actually have the book. It's called Torso. But this murder took place shortly after, several years after, the Cleveland Torso murders, which is like one of the biggest unsolved mysteries here, from Cleveland and from the history. And if anybody knows the movie The Untouchables with Kevin Costner, Elliot Ness.
Elliot Ness.
So before
Elliot Ness, I know the Tupac lyric.
Of course you do. So before Elliot Ness went to Chicago and took down Capone, he worked here. as a detective, and that was one of his cases. Was the torso murders, and they never.
And I guess they were cut in half at the torso.
And, well, the murders, the MO was very, very similar. So there have been people that have thought that could be, because most of the time with a serial killer, the compulsion doesn't stop. But then again,
right, and then they move
any
on.
other right,
and there's calling cards, like
right,
similarities.
So they had a lot of those theories that it was like a serial killer actually committed the murder that had moved into LA or was passing through or something like that.
But then again, there were no further similar murders like this that anybody knows of that any women were found. So and everything that we know now that they didn't quite know then, but know now about serial killers is the compulsion usually ramps up, the MO stays the same. All that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It is a mystery.
And if Hodel did have like cops on his payroll or whatever, right, was being protected, like that kind of goes to your theory. Not only do they not want to share info with other agencies, like they're going to protect their own at all costs and stuff like that. So it's like the George Hodel was a scumbag at the very least, right? At the very, very least was a scumbag. But that show that they put, he's a creepy dude in that show. And I Am the Night. Very creepy dude, but
we're
fascinating stuff.
Lucky, aren't we? We're lucky. Like we're addicted to like drugs and alcohol. We could have been addicted to killing people.
Thank God we're not addicted to murder, Corey.
Probably some similarities in that.
Thank God, Mom, you did something right.
Go ahead.
There's a few prevalent serial killers from Cleveland, aren't there, Greg?
Yeah, there's looking at one.
No, seriously, I think there's at least a couple that I can think of. Well, that one guy who locked the chick in the basement, I guess he wasn't a serial killer.
Ariel Castro, and then there was Anthony Soule.
That dude was a nut.
Yeah, that was absolutely insane.
See, I'm not very versed in this stuff. I only know like the big names. Like Ted Bundy.
See, this kind of stuff is always intrigued me, and it's the psychology behind it, right? Like what makes these guys tick the way that they do.
What was the guy's name down here, Bill? We were talking about it not too long ago. The Orange Grove something. He was
whoa, that's gonna be next week, bud. We're gonna
my bad. I didn't know that.
Spoiler alert.
Sneak peek in it.
Yeah, good.
We're gonna talk about him. Don't you guys worry.
All right. Any other comments, questions, anything else?
No, case solved, dude. George did.
Well, and one big criticism of the Son's book and books is that he also tried to, and there's a documentary series about it as well, but he also tried to claim that his dad was the Zodiac killer as well.
Right.
It wasn't just that he wrote.
And one more thing,
right,
too.
Right.
Like the guy who said that if you brought that case in here, like you get like that's very accurate. Like the things attached to both of them are very circumstantial. I mean, there's no shred of any real evidence.
Right.
Just like, I don't like this guy. He does weird shit. It must have been him.
Yeah, he raped my sister, so he must be a murderer. Which listen, let's be like, maybe, but we
wouldn't mind if he got pinned for it, but
you can't really prove it in a court of law without a reason.
Yeah, I mean,
the onus is on the state. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah,
right.
And forensic science was nowhere even close to what it is nowadays.
Right.
Right. You wouldn't stand a chance in LA.
Well, I mean,
there's cameras everywhere,
dude. Like, if you read the coroner's report from the Black Dahlia murders, I mean, like one of us could have wrote it. You know what I'm saying? That's how like it's nothing like modern day crime solving. So but yeah, just the and the other thing is too is 40 different people came forward and confessed to this murder. Now a lot of those people were just fame seeking kooks, and
all of them
pretty common when things like this happen, but there's going to be a lot like the thrown at the wall, if you will, to see if something sticks.
Do you guys think if this would have happened today that YSL Woody would have admitted to catching that body?
Yes, I do.
He seems like the type.
Yep.
We're kind of due for a serial killer, aren't we? Like, I feel like we don't really have that anymore because maybe law enforcement's so good.
At any given moment, Corey,
didn't they just have one in Idaho?
Hold on. There are dozens and dozens of serial killers active at any given moment in the United States. And that's just, there's one, I think, in Tampa right now that they're trying to figure out.
Here's the deal.
That's a hurricane, Bill.
Look, I
No, he
believe,
might even kill someone before the hurricane comes. You never know.
Oh my god!
Perfect cover.
The thing that we're finding
Yep.
a lot nowadays, you know, and again, you know, innocent until proven guilty in this country, but like a very, you know, the one that's big in the news right now is that Brian Koberger, right? Is what we're
Was that the
finding now
Idaho
is-
guy?
Oh, he's
Idaho
fucking
guy.
guilty.
That's what I was
he's
just thinking.
guilty.
Well, let's
I
be
watched
careful.
the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I mean that there's a reason why he's on trial and charged with 4 murders, but what's happening nowadays is because of the advances in technologies and because of the advances in technology and everything like that, man, like they're getting caught on their first one, you know,
Right.
Exactly. Dear serial killers, if you kill somebody, the police will reverse engineer Ring doorbells, literally all the way back through. That's how they caught that guy. They got that car on one thing and they literally went through, like they did a broadcast here, submit all your Ring information, and then they networked it all together and they figured out exactly where he was. Then they went and got his cell phone data, and the dude circled the place and blah blah blah, came back, went in, like is in there with his phone, you know, and now they can locate you with your phone within like a couple feet, you know what I mean?
Well, and just the general evolution of having cameras almost everywhere nowadays,
right.
Traffic cameras, stoplight, you know, it's just kind of crazy. So
Greg, who is that dude that buried all the bodies on Long Island? I can't think of his.
Oh, the
Gilgo Beach guy.
Yeah, Rex Hauerman or Hauserman, or one of the
They caught that guy, right?
Yeah, they caught him. But it took them 20 years. But
right,
yeah,
20 years. Like that's fascinating when it's like when they can do that after all these years.
Well, apparently you get away with more when you kill like hookers because no one really like looks into it as much.
Yeah, they didn't
like that guy was killing all hookers, you know. And so like this lady right here, even if you think about it, it's only one person and it's such a notorious thing, but like I'm sure that's happened to a hooker somewhere in Vegas and we've never heard a word about it.
Or just a random, it doesn't have to be just a random. It was she was half famous, that's why, and it was the sensational nature of how all that stuff. So
but cutting the body in half is pretty that's
pretty wild,
man.
Yeah. So all right, let's kick it. I always love transitioning from murder and serial killing to spirituality, boys.
Indeed.
And meditation reading. So this week is we're going what we did last week. Corey brought the reading last week. Thank you, Corey. Greg is going to bring the reading this week, and we're all going to pontificate on it for a few moments. Go ahead, Greg.
Excellent. Thank you, guys. All right, so we're just gonna start out. This is from a book called Touchstones, and it's like a daily meditation reading. So to live a spiritual life, we must first find the courage to enter into the desert of loneliness and to change it by gentle and persistent efforts into the garden of solitude. That is, I'm going to butcher this name. It's a quote by Henry J.M. Nguyen. I think it's French, but it's a quote to start off the reading, which is, knowing our loneliness and admitting to us is the beginning of a spiritual path for many men. Today we are on a spiritual journey. We already have the means to translate the pain of our loneliness into a deeper spiritual dimension. Most men in this program came in deeply aware of their feelings of isolation. Now, with the companionship of our higher power, we can spend time alone and use it for spiritual growth. As we develop a relationship with ourselves and deepen our knowledge of our higher power, our loneliness transforms into solitude. In this quiet moment today, we can be more accepting of ourselves than we were in the past. We admit loneliness has caused us pain, but now we can see it can also lead us to a deeper self where we find serene solitude. This change is a movement into the spiritual world. Thanks to God for the solitude I have found in my life. And for me, this was huge. This was a big door that opened in my life. Certainly, probably a few years into my recovery, to be honest with you. But I think we can all, through all of some of our shared experience and personal experience, know what it's like to be isolated, right? In active addiction, in active alcoholism. Even when we're putting on the good face to go out into the general public and play like everything's okay. You know, we come home and we we're deeply ashamed of what we're doing and things like that, you know, but we isolate and we kind of dive within ourselves and into that shame and that guilt and just that mire of misery. But for me, going through the program of recovery and working on myself and getting to know who I am, and finally being able to be comfortable in myself and comfortable in my own head and not feeling like I was coming unglued or coming out of my own skin, is that serene solitude like the reading talks about, right? And you know, I think back to relationships that I'd had in the past and everything like that, like things that I didn't know about myself. And you know, the feelings that came along with them, like no wonder things never worked out. Right. But when I finally figured out who I am and started to go on that journey, with a higher power and into a spiritual dimension, like the loneliness and faded away, the isolation faded away, and I became comfortable with just me being me, you know. And now, not all the time, you know, but I look forward to the solitude on some days. You know, I look forward to, you know, coming home and going on a walk in the woods and just like just experiencing life for what it is, right? It is something that I think is necessary if we're going to grow not only in a spiritual life but in life itself, right? Is we have to get comfortable with who we are and know what we are. And once we do that, we can kind of move through that doorway into healing. So that's what I got, gentlemen. I'm eager to hear what you guys have on this particular topic.
Very good. That was a very thought-provoking reading. I have Bill in the rotation next. Do you want to go next, Bill, or do you want to table
I'll go
and
next.
have somebody
That's
else
fine.
go?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's a beautiful reading, Greg. I appreciate that. You know, the first time I ever found solitude, I would say real solitude, like you had just described, that was beautifully written. You know, I really I was living with a bunch of dudes at the time, and I went in my room and I shut the door and told everybody, don't bother me. And I began to have a boundary there and a boundary here and a boundary of I'm actually going to do the work. And I got in there and I started writing, and hours later, tears later, you know what I mean? I had come out of there knowing I had done what was asked of me to be done. But I also had felt like I had, even though at that time I would have claimed to be an atheist, I had touched the beginning of a relationship with something different than me that was able to help me console, control, and understand my past and to grow through it, not as a victim, but as somebody who was trying to understand it with the intent to grow and heal. And when I did that, I had a spiritual experience, you know, writing that stuff. I began to understand what solitude was. I further progressed that by starting to learn how to meditate. You know, when I first started to learn how to meditate, I couldn't sit still for a split second. You know, I literally went to the Buddhist temple and learned how to meditate there. So I'm like, these guys will know how to do it. And sure enough, they did. You know, I went there, I believe, a total of 3 times. And by the time I was done, I'd acquired enough knowledge to sit still for 15 minutes. You know, they taught you about posture and why you sit in a certain posture and really just the very raw basics of that. But the classes were specifically geared towards meditation. And in those series of events, I found solitude, which is something I look forward to. I mean, I'm a big fan of it. I wake up early. My intent there is because there is solitude, easy to acquire. I can easily get into a state because everyone's sleeping. Or, you know, kind of even in my subliminal, like the world is still sleeping, but I am awake to take care of business. You know what I mean? And through solitude, I mean, today, all my answers come from that. So it's pretty profound that an atheist can now develop a solitude as a answering block through a higher power that I'll name God. To solve the problems of my life for the rest of my life, and I'm fully good with that. You know, I thoroughly enjoy it. I think as a result of the solitude, I've become a more peaceful person over time, matching calamity with serenity, like we all go through a lot of things, but today I remain peaceful. I don't live a life of war. And it all began with a little bit of solitude and instructions. And I love that reading, Greg. So thanks for sharing with us.
Thank you, Bill. Mr. Michener, you're up next, sir.
Okay. Yeah, really good reading. And, it takes me back to pre-sobriety, where every day was full of loneliness and despair and just horror, really. But man, that's the stuff that, like, it's the reason I think why we stay in contact with newly sober people and try to help them, because it is incredibly hard otherwise to remember what that feels like, to remember what it feels like to not have a place in this world. Because that's exactly how it felt for me. In the coming months or maybe even years before I got sober, once and for all. Good friend of ours, Joe, always used to say it felt like the world had passed me by, and that's a pretty good description. And, sitting in the middle of a not so forgiving city with nowhere to go, borrowing a cell phone to call a friend who's not going to come get you because they're tired of your crap. Like, that was loneliness for me, and of course at the time I blamed it on them, and I blamed everybody else for the way I was feeling and stuff. But the truth was I did it all to myself and whatever. The reading also took me back to a part in a text that we're all familiar with, and it talks about, specifically, it talks about a boy whistling in the dark who would take half a dozen drinks if he could get away with it. He's not happy about his sobriety, so and so, whatever. Specifically, it says he cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either with alcohol or without it. Then he will know loneliness as such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. So, I mean, it took me right there. And that was probably the best way that could be written. And then fast forward to today, or really my whole sobriety, I haven't said, like, the words "I'm bored" in many years.
Right.
I haven't felt truly alone since I got sober, I would imagine. I mean, yeah, I can't think of a time that I felt truly alone since I got here. There have I guess there have been times of, like, minimal loneliness if you put it in perspective, really, because anything I'm ever going through is not that bad in sobriety so far. Anyway, nothing has, like, truly just happened to me out of nowhere. Any scrapes I've gotten myself into, so it's been like that. But no, for the most part, and you guys alluded to it. Or not even alluded, but said it. I always like to describe what I think was, if I can describe my spiritual awakening in anything, it's when I was like 6 months sober, and I was laying on the couch at the halfway house, and I had gone a couple hours just doing that, not asleep, not nothing, not TV on, not just chilling. I probably got up and got some water or whatever, but, like, for the most part, just hanging out by myself. And it dawned on me suddenly, one moment aware, the one moment unaware, the next aware, that I hadn't been texting anybody trying to make plans. I hadn't been texting any girls or anything, or this, that, and the other. You know what I mean? Like, all the stuff that I could never, because that's not me. I always needed somebody or something outside of myself to be doing, or whatever. We got to make plans at the minimum. Got to know what I'm doing tonight, and there wasn't any of that. I like sat with myself at, in perfect ease for a while. And, but I will say that like I said, true loneliness I haven't known in sobriety, I don't think, because when I don't really feel like I have myself, I do tend to have the people around me that tend to love me until I can figure it out. But I will say, like, that's waxed and waned though, and I've had my moments, but I've never felt in sobriety like I did before sobriety internally. That's a fact. So good reading, Greg.
Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. The guy, my mentor, the guy that guided me through the recovery program, he was, I can very distinctly remember him talking to me about isolation and solitude, and I'll never forget it. I can remember where we were sitting in his house when he talked to me about it. And he said, isolation is your separateness, separate, you being separate, different, and alone, or feeling like you're separate, different, and alone from all of your fellows, men and women that are exactly just like you and suffer with the same disease and the same spiritual malady. And he said, isolation will get you drunk, kid. And he said, solitude is where the real harmony with your higher power comes in. And he challenged me early on in my sobriety. So I after the halfway house, I lived with him for a long time. Bill always wonders why I never let him move in with me either. But
you got someone kicked out too.
Yeah, well, that's shout out to Minnesota Mike.
On the
but
show.
he would be a great guest.
Boy,
and he would like challenge me to be like, hey, try just coming home on a Friday night and like reading a book or like watching a movie or just like, and it was very difficult for me early on. I did feel alone in recovery, in sobriety, when I was in early sobriety, right? New town, never really been in this environment. I didn't go to treatment and like into the halfway house. Like for instance, I know, like Corey, you came into the halfway house, I believe, with a certain amount of people from treatment, right?
Yeah.
So like there's like you had some. I didn't have that. I literally was sleeping at my dad's house in Delray Beach, Florida, on Sunday night, and on Monday night I was in a halfway house an hour north of that, and I didn't know anyone, and it was scary, and all that. Now that quickly dissipated as I got to know people and like went to meetings regularly and like really got involved in the program and kept coming back, and like people would see me on a daily basis. But I was lonely in the beginning, but by the time I got with my mentor and the person who took me through the recovery program, I started seeing the value in not having to be like with the cool kids crowd, so to speak, and like always out and about and doing something social every time, to the point where like a year or so later, my mentor kind of challenged me again to get involved in like extracurricular social activities with people outside of recovery, because I had become so regimented in my recovery that he could foresee that I needed to kind of expand my horizons. And I did. And I started playing racquetball with a bunch of friends from work, and it was a lot of fun. So I've gone through periods of that, but the isolation and the solitude and the reading is very thought. By the way, Greg, he was a Dutch priest and professor. I looked him up. And apparently it's a really all around good dude, but getting comfortable being by myself, right? I'm never alone because I have God with me now, but getting comfortable being by myself. Our literature talks about like the last analysis. It is only there that he may be found, right? I can only experience God right now, the here and now, right? I can remember him from yesterday and the wonderful things that he's done in my life in days past. I can think about him and hope for the future, but I can only experience my higher power right here and now. And that was like light bulb moment for me in early sobriety. I had to get somewhat spiritually fit by myself before I could be of any use to other human beings, whether in a business sense, a social sense, a romantic sense, anything. I had to get completely content and comfortable in my own skin and like work on my own spiritual development before I could bring anything even remotely healthy to the table in another relationship, whether with a girl or a business venture or family, even social stuff. And that was, that was a huge thing for me because I was Mr. Social Butterfly back in my drinking days. I was the guy that my mom jokes like, if I could have, I was so afraid to miss out on things. And my mom jokes that, so Shawn, you could have afforded to miss out on a few things. You probably wouldn't have gone to jail so many times. Like I could have just stayed home here and there. And mom's right. But
you would have found a way.
I'm sure I would have. One of the things I really like in this reading was we already have the means to translate the pain of our loneliness into a deeper spiritual dimension. I think it's obvious what that means on the sense of the whole reading, but I think that I take that when I was reading it the other day when you sent it, Greg, I take that one step further, and it's like I already know that my experience can benefit others in recovery, right? Somebody that I've been through the same stuff somebody else is either going through or has been through or vice versa. So I know like on a fellowship level, on that human being connectedness level, my pain and trauma or whatever I've been through, and it talks about it in our literature, right? We see how no matter how far down the scales we have gone, we see how our experience can benefit others. And that's one aspect of it. And the second aspect of it is what I think this reading is really talking about is like taking that, turning it inward and letting that pain, right? The my past is the greatest key I have really to help others in need, and taking that and turning that into like spiritual unfoldment and letting that like build my character for the future. So great reading, Greg. That really was very thought provoking, which I think is the whole point of those readings, right? And to meditate, like Bill was talking about, like the meditation part. Early on, I would pick like a phrase out of the reading I did in the morning. And I've been reading Emmett Fox for years, but I pick like a phrase, and that's the thought that I would meditate on in the beginning until I really got into a good practice with it. So, well, guys, we're some effing spiritual giants on this here podcast. Just want you guys to know that, so good stuff. Very good. Anybody else?
Have one more quote. I actually probably should have put this before in the spirit of the fact that we don't know how to transition properly on this show, but therapy only works when we have a genuine desire to know ourselves as we are, not as we would like to be. And that is from the fictional character, Dr. Hannibal Lecter.
Nice.
I got one too. You miss all the shots you don't take, and that is from Michael J. Scott from The Office.
Yes, it is. Well, it's from Wayne Gretzky.
Right. Yeah, Wayne Gretzky. And
Wayne Gretzky didn't make that
yes,
up.
He did. And Gary Player has a similar quote. The golfer says,
it's like when they say this is the first hamburger place ever or whatever. It's like, yeah, okay, sure.
Gary Player said 90% of the putts you leave short don't go in.
I like the wild dude. What's the wild golfer dude with the fat dude? Daly or whatever?
Oh, John Daly.
That's my guy right there.
I'm sure it is.
Him and Fat Pat.
Fat Pat.
Yeah.
No, good stuff, guys. I really enjoy this, the coming together. And we're all imperfect in a lot of our ways, but I think we're all at our best when we're talking about this stuff and trying to endeavor to help each other and help others. So it warms my heart. What do you think, Corey?
Yeah, that's fine.
You all right over there, buddy?
Yeah.
It's a nice shirt you got, Corey.
Dude, did you guys see my shirt? We're gonna land a plane, but did you see the shirt?
Green.
That's how I feel about you guys.
For all the listeners that are listening to this, he's got a Scream shirt on because of the new movie.
It's Ghostface with a middle finger up.
Greg looks like that's cool. Greg looks like he has a Halloween shirt on too, though.
Well, this is the Fiend Bray Wyatt, but yeah, I mean, definitely spooky.
He was scary,
to say the least.
Can we real quick? All right, spookiest serial killer. I'll go
taking
first.
The long way home with the plane. Go ahead. Spookiest serial killer.
I'm gonna go real quick off the top of the head. I'm going BTK killer. That dude's a nut. Shawn.
I don't follow him enough to know who's the spookiest. Probably something out of Criminal Minds. The Boston Strangler.
Terrible answer. Oh, okay, that's good. Great. What do you got, Greg?
Man, I don't know if I could pick one. I don't
Caught
know.
him off guard, dude.
Yeah, you really did.
Corey Mitchner.
Let Corey know. Yeah, let Corey go, and I'll think of it.
You're gonna blow his mind up.
Just like the creepiest, like the one that you're like, that fucking dude gives me the willies.
I know it's recency bias because it just came out, but the Menendez brothers were psychopaths, dude. And
that dude in Utah too, though. That dude was freaky. They killed it. We just talked about him, Brian, whatever. That's crazy.
Michael Myers.
I just had a really bad joke, but I'm not going to say it.
Michael Myers.
I would say a toss up between the toy box killer
that guy's crazy.
dude. As
the tape. You ever hear the tape?
The tape is absolutely horrific.
The plane is running out of gas.
I would say, yeah.
I'm going Dahmer because he ate people.
That's the only one you can remember,
that's
right?
Pretty. That is pretty creepy, though. I got to give you that.
But he seemed like a nice guy otherwise.
Yeah.
Shout out to all the serial killers that are listening to our podcast.
Yeah, we're gonna catch you.
Shout out to our listeners. Please like, follow, and share on all socials at Trudge Report Pod. Email us at trudgereportpod@yahoo.com. Send in your mailbag requests for questions, topics, comments, concerns to any of these handles. If you just want us to yell at Corey, we can do that too. Yeah. Remember, we're all here if anyone wants to talk about recovery and our experiences, or if you're struggling with some form of addiction. Next week, Bill is bringing the spooky subject, so get ready for that. It'll be good. And then, as always, thank you to Janine and Stella Mix Podcast Management. Good night. God bless. May you trudge the road of happy destiny. Stay safe during the storm. We'll see you next week.